Guys, I'm excited to let you know that Mandell has agreed to do a live Q&A session straight after the show. We will be live on YouTube only, live on YouTube only. So if you're on Facebook, as soon as the show is done, please hop onto YouTube. If you're on YouTube, please stay right there and look for our live broadcast, and we will have Mandell with us live for any questions that you may have. So as you watch the show, if you have any questions as he speaks, if anything triggers, please note it down, and we will see you straight after the show live on YouTube. I am so excited about this. All right, guys. So we will see you there live on YouTube straight after the show. Against All Odds family, welcome to another edition of Against All Odds. I am your host, Sylvia Rakwabwa, and today my guest is Mandell Crawley. Mandell is one of our friends, and he has an incredible story. And as usual, I only bring you guys the best. So I just thought I'd bring Mandell here for him to share his story. Mandell, welcome to Against All Odds.
Sylvia, it is really good to be with you. I've been looking forward to this for some time, and I'm excited. I have an opportunity to share this new platform, share your platform, with our viewers. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you for making it. So Mandell, let's jump right in because we have a lot to talk about.
Sure.
So tell us, who is Mandell Crawley now? Tell us about yourself now.
Yeah, so Mandell Crawley, born and raised Chicago, proud native of the city of Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I've been in New York for a little over 20 years now, and I've come to New York as part of my career journey. I started it with my firm when I was in high school, and I trust we may get into that a little bit. And when I finished undergrad, I had this unbelievable opportunity to move to New York. So I've been out here since. So there's a professional context, which we'll talk about. And then more importantly, I'm a husband of 12 years to my wife, Allison. And we've got our beautiful twin daughters, or on some days, our terrorists. Our daughters, Jordan and Jaden, they're 7 years old. So I'm a husband and a father, far more importantly.
Awesome. And your job sounds really glamorous. You are the head of private wealth management at Morgan Stanley.
Yes.
Certainly very important.
Yeah.
But like you said, you grew up West Side Chicago. Yeah. So your early days were a far cry from where you are now. Tell us a bit about yourself growing up, your family, and all that.
Sure. And you're 100% right, Sylvia. I in my day job today, I work with ultra high net worth, individuals, families, and their foundations around the world. Mm-hmm. There's over $500 billion of assets that are, under my oversight, if you will, and the team of folks across the country who I work with. And that's one extreme, and that's obviously my reality today. But my story, starting on Chicago's West Side, is one that entails quite a bit of adversity, in the early days. So I'm one of three boys. Very much like, you and Peter can relate to that. So I always say, how's the middle boy doing? Send him my love because of the complexity that comes with being the middle child. But so I'm one of three boys, and my parents, Jacqueline and Gregory, they were high school sweethearts. Oh. And my dad was in the military. He was in the Army. And they were this young sort of budding family with three kids. And unfortunately, my mom, during labor with my younger brother, unfortunately, she passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She had an aneurysm. She was only 22 years old, so she had her whole life ahead of her. Oh. And my dad, who's, he's now 22 years old, he's got three boys. And his world has obviously been turned upside down, and candidly, he never recovered from that. And that led to a life of, drugs, alcoholism. Unfortunately, he had a few unforced errors that led him to prison. And unfortunately, he ultimately was killed when he was 39. Wow. So he was a young guy himself. And so that's an extraordinary amount of trauma that my brothers and I experienced early on.
Wow.
But at the same time, we experienced a measure of grace. My grandparents, who raised my mother, stepped in, and these are folks who migrated from the southern states. They were from Mississippi in the 50s, like a lot of Black American families here in the U.S. during the Great Migration from 1915 to the 1970s. You had 6 million families move to northern cities, and for them, it was Chicago, where they raised their kids, and they raised us like we were their own. And that was great. And we didn't have much by way of resources. I don't want to say we were a middle class family. I think that would be overstating it. But both of them, my grandmother was a waitress at a restaurant in downtown Chicago. My grandfather was a factory worker for Oscar Mayer. But we had a lot of love. And, that experience, growing up where we grew up and the family dynamic that we had, I really loved my childhood. The community was special for us. The Boys and Girls Club and my church was a big part of our experience. That was one of the institutions that was critical for our household. But what I will tell you is everything changed when I was 16. And my grandmother, who's everything, right? She was the core of the ecosystem of our family. And she passed away from cancer. Oh. So from the time I was 16, that accelerated my transition to adulthood. My grandfather's now older. I have my younger brother that I had to look after. And essentially I had to work. And so how I ended up at my firm at 17 years old was there was this work study program that existed that was part of my high school. And there was 5 students that interviewed, and I happened to get the opportunity. But I was also trying to get a job at Wendy's at the same time. And through the grace of God, I got this opportunity that ultimately ended up changing my life forever.
Wow. Mandell, I am supposed to be listening to your story and taking it in, but I am just so touched by the parallels because my mom died of an aneurysm as well. And it's been almost, next week, it's actually 10 years. So yeah, so that struck a chord. Now, would you give us some context of West Side Chicago, the environment in which you grew up? Set the stage for us, because I did my research. As you know, we only moved to the US 3 years ago. And so we don't know much, but it's actually one of the most dangerous places in America, not just Chicago, in America.
It's the West Side of Chicago has a lot of similarities to many of our big cities across the country. So whether you're talking about Oakland or Detroit, Philadelphia, Baltimore, a lot of these big cities, obviously parts of New York City. A lot of these cities have struggled for decades with some structural headwinds, socioeconomic opportunity, very challenged educational systems, access to capital or lack of access to capital, challenge with housing, if you will, and in the virtual cycle of crime because of a criminal justice system that has been extraordinarily punitive. And Chicago, the West Side of Chicago in particular, is no different. Now, I think it's also fair to say I think Chicago is the greatest city in the world. It's home. I'm obviously biased.
I would argue.
I'm biased, but it's a fantastic city. But it is definitely particularly the West Side and parts of the South Side of Chicago. Gang violence and some other things, and some of the items that I aforementioned has been a real struggle for for folks. And now there have been some inflows of capital. We see it in Harlem and parts of Brooklyn. The gentrification is happening, and as you and I both know, Sylvia, that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's great because you got capital coming into these communities, and you see what these communities could be. But the challenge is, obviously, the cost of living in these communities, rise to such a level where folks are being priced out of their homes. So it's a bit heartbreaking in that context.
Absolutely. So you spoke about your internship with Morgan Stanley, which changed the trajectory of your life. I heard from the grapevine that you were unsure as to what to wear for this interview. You had some help. Tell us about that.
Well, the story goes, and I wish it was an urban legend. I wish it was up for debate, but the truth of the matter is I wore a gold suit. This is, Morgan Stanley is considered one of the traditional white shoe firms. It's one of the great investment banks, in the world. And when I got an opportunity to compete for this internship, again, one of 5 students, I going downtown in Chicago when you're from where I'm from was a really big deal. And so my first thought was, let me wear my best suit.
Right.
And as I mentioned, the church was an essential part of my upbringing. We were at church, Wednesday nights, sometimes Saturday nights, and all day on Sunday. So it was codified in my brothers and I. And this gold suit that I had, right, was my best suit. And it's the suit when I wore to church on Sundays, the mothers of the church would tell me how good I looked. So logic was I'll wear the same suit to my interview. And I don't know if I got hired because they felt sorry for me, which is very possible. Or as I like to tell myself, they said, anybody that's willing to wear a suit like that in downtown Chicago and they're that bold, we want them on our team. So that's what I tell myself, but I'm sure it's because they felt sorry for me. But it's
oh gosh. I am sure they must have seen something in you. Now, did you always want to be a banker, or did you have other aspirations?
No, I mean it was not something that was in my head. It's not. That old adage of you tend to want to be what you can see. I mean, no one in my community was in the banking space. And so, it just wasn't, it was just a completely foreign sort of land in many respects. I had always wanted to be an educator. I wanted to be a teacher. The nobility of the profession was something that always been attractive to me. I mean, some of my teachers definitely made a big difference in my life as I was coming up. And then there were some of the women at my church who were great educators. And so when I applied to college, I applied to one school, and that was Northeastern Illinois in Chicago. So I knew I was going to stay local for school because of my younger brother and some other commitments. And Northeastern, has its origins as a teacher's college in the 60s.
Okay.
And it was reasonably priced. And I was a pretty decent high school student, so I knew I wouldn't have much trouble getting in. And so I applied to one school, and I had no problems getting in. And my internship was supposed to end after my senior year of high school, but I had a pretty decent amount of hustle. And my coworkers, my colleagues on the desk, they knew my personal situation. My younger brother and I were living in low income housing at the time. And they said, look, if you are going to go to school locally, we'd love to keep you on. And if you can figure out, your school, the school work schedule dynamics, we'd love to have you. And so I ended up going to undergrad full-time at night.
Wow.
And I worked on this trading desk full-time during the day. And it was probably, Sylvia, my second year, my first semester, sophomore year. I was in a microeconomics class, and I was doing really well in the class. And part of it was just because I'm sitting on this trading desk and we're talking about a lot of the same concepts, and I was able to bring it to the classroom. And my professor said, you're pretty good at this. You should think about this as a career. And that started this acceleration, if you will, of my pivoting to financial services. And I haven't looked back 28 years later.
Wow. So looking back, Mandell, as a young person going into Morgan Stanley, this huge organization, this Fortitude,
Sure.
1 of 5 students going for an interview. What do you think they saw in you?
My grandparents, and at my church, I was thrust into leadership positions even as a young person. So I was the youth superintendent of my Sunday school. And what that required was every third or fourth Sunday, I would be in front of the entire congregation, the Sunday school congregation, facilitating like a 30 or 45 minute, session as we worked through our lesson for that particular day. So being in front of people and communicating and finding my voice was a big part of that. Another thing that happened to me as a young man was I was the president of my youth choir. And I had folks that were far older than me. It was 100-person youth choir. And so, just the dynamics of trying to, keep everything organized and on schedule and stuff like that. And so you had to, I had some leadership opportunities that I think made a real difference. And so but my grandparents, were really helpful because I see a similar trait in my older brother and younger brother. And we're doing very different things in our lives as professionals. But there's some common denominators that we have. Like we can talk and connect with anyone.
Wow.
Like you can put us in the middle of pick your place. And there's just something that we have. So it's the old nature nurture dynamic. I think that this is one of those nature things that we have. And so, being in an environment where nobody looked like me, candidly, I felt pretty comfortable, telling my story and articulating my why. And I think that played a part in me getting the opportunity. But above all else, Sylvia, it was the grace of God. God's grace stepped in, and because if that hadn't happened, Lord knows what I would have done.
Absolutely. Mandell, tell us about your career path in Morgan Stanley. You have been there 28 years.
Yes.
28 years is a long time.
It's a bit, it's unorthodox, right? In the sense that it's rare in today's world that someone stays at a particular institution for that amount of time. And while I can tell your viewers that it's the people or it's the culture, and clearly those things play a part, Sylvia, I would say it's been, just the incredible opportunity that I've had over the last 28 years. I've been able to do very different things across the firm's ecosystem. So my first 14 years, I was in the capital markets, the sales and trading businesses. And there's a certain amount of intellectual stimulation that you get from that environment. Then I ultimately became the national sales manager of our wealth management business. And here I was able to, work with advisors, clients across our entire investment platform versus just fixed income. And then I became chief marketing officer of the firm, and I'm not particularly creative, right, as Peter knows and as you may have heard. But I was able to become the firm's chief marketing officer, focused on the firm's brand and what that brand represented globally. And then, I'm now, serving as head of private wealth, and private wealth is a bit of a portfolio. It's a bit of a holding company. I also oversee our offshore wealth management business, which is a $170 billion business. I oversee co-run our institutional client coverage business, our sales and trading business for institutional relationships, our family office resources area, our sports and entertainment. So there's a number of other businesses that fit under PWM. And so for me, the stickiness has been the confidence that the firm has had in my ability to take on incremental responsibility, to handle complexity, to be appropriately commercial on behalf of the franchise. Right. And the fact that I've been able to stretch and do these different things and show a measure of agility, that has been the thing above all else that has kept me at the firm.
That's amazing. And you did mention that, when you started, there were not a lot of people that looked like you.
Yeah.
Tell us what paint a picture of what the diversity looked like.
Yeah. So when I first started way back in those high school years, there was a small sales and trading desk in Chicago with about 15 professionals, some traders, some salespeople, and then there was me. And I was the only person of color in that particular workspace. Now, a couple floors below with the firm, there were a couple of advisors, a couple of other personnel that were Black that was helpful, including one high-performing financial advisor who was really accomplished. She had done some great things. She had shown up in Black Enterprise, and so she had become an early mentor of mine. So that was helpful to see them, to be proximate to that. But on this trading desk, again, no one looked like me, but I would say the spirit of the people, and I don't want to be overly dramatic here, was one that was extraordinarily inclusive. It wasn't long, that my relationship with a lot of folks on the desk had extended beyond the trading desk, and I started to do things with them off the field, go to dinner, go skiing, et cetera. And so my worldview started to expand even further. And I will tell you, Sylvia, the thing that was probably most important for me as an 18, 19-year-old person at that time was to discover how unremarkable white folks were. And I know that's a bit provocative, and I don't mean that to be insulting, but what I mean is when you grow up where I grew up, right, you have this vision, you have this perspective that folks are in such a much better place than you are, and they've got these gifts and these skills that you don't have. But when it's almost like, the Wizard of Oz, you get to look behind the curtain and you come to understand that, yes, they're remarkable in their own way, but they have flaws and gaps, and they argue with their families and they make mistakes like everybody else. So getting exposure to that so early on was a really big deal for me.
Amazing. So true. And Mandell, when you got offered the position, you were obviously working by day and schooling by night. Like you said, there were all these people, and there was you doing this as a student. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing a lot of the remedial tasks that you'd expect a 17, 18-year-old kid to be doing. I was running a lot of errands. I was grabbing some lunch on occasion. I was doing a lot of the clerical work around the office. So this wasn't like, high IQ, work. But what stood out to my colleagues on the desk was I had a bit of hustle.
Right.
So every day, and I was only working 20 hours a week, but whenever I'd show up, I'd be this annoying kid walking around this trading floor, like, hey, anything I can do to assist, and if I completed a task, I'd be right back saying, hey, what else do you need? And I just think that resonated with folks. And that's a trait that I attribute to my grandparents, particularly my grandmother, right? Wasn't formally educated, was a waitress downtown Chicago, and rain, sleet, or snow, she was out, doing what she needed to do to take care of her family. So maybe I got a little bit of that work ethic, and I think that worked out for me.
Right. Now, you talk about your hustle. Apart from that, what would you attribute your success to?
I'd say a couple things.
Okay.
One, a high degree of self-confidence. And that self-confidence has come through years and years of scar tissue and trial and error and making mistakes, et cetera. But I would say just through the process, through the grind of the process, I have a high degree of self-confidence, because I understand that while outcomes for us, right, may be uneven, because of the competitive forces that are at work in a free market society, but also know that opportunities have been uneven for us. And I know that the headwinds that I face and what I had to endure are so great that when I feel, when my confidence gets shaken, I have to remind myself, right, of how much I've been able to endure and come through. And so that resiliency, right, that's a bit of, for Black folks in particular, that's a bit of a superpower for us, right? That's been the theme of our people. So that's one. Second, I'd say, Sylvia, is the ability to manage my insecurities. Right. So and we all have them. You know this, right? And I don't care how long you've been doing
I'm just finding out.
So, the insecurities that we have, sometimes I'll give a pitch at a meeting and it doesn't go great, and I'll start second guessing myself, or I'm meeting with a client or I'm meeting with the board and I get extremely nervous, and just managing those insecurities, right? Just acknowledging and knowing that everybody has them. So that's it.
Right.
And the third thing, I'd say, Sylvia, that's been a really big, important part. And we talked about my 28 years at the firm. And while when you read my bio, it reads like I've had this elegant, linear progression of ever increasing success. And you and I both know that careers are circuitous. I've had some bumps along the way. I've made some mistakes along the way. But I think, having impulse control is another important thing that has contributed to my success. So instead of taking my ball and go home every time something didn't go my way, that resiliency, again, I think has played a part. So self-confidence, managing my insecurities, and a bit of impulse control. Those are the three things that I'd attribute it to.
That's amazing. And thank you so much about sharing the part about your insecurities, because we all have them. And sometimes when you see people, suited and booted and holding their head up high, of course, we don't know the story behind the person or what kind of day that they've even had. But, they're still pushing along. And it's important for everyone to know that, because this is something that, like you say, we all have them. And so it's important to see someone in your position being vulnerable enough to share that with us. Now, Mandell, how have your family taken to your success? Are your grandparents still alive? What do they see of you?
Yeah, so sadly, my grandmother passed away when I was 16. So she, was not here to see the evolution, right? To see this project that she took on, right? Produce the fruit, but make no mistake, a lot of who I am is because of her, and frankly, all of who I've become is because of the sacrifice that my grandparents made.
Yeah.
But my grandfather, who passed away 10 years ago, 2010, he was able to see a lot of the momentum start to take root, to take shape, and I know, and he was tough on us. He loved us, but he was tough on us. But I know he was extraordinarily proud of us, because like you and Peter, I oftentimes say, that I'm my grandparents' wildest dreams, right? When they were in Inverness, Mississippi, or Indianola, Mississippi, all those years ago, one generation removed from being a slave, and to see, where I've been able to go and the places I've been able to go, because of their sacrifice, I know that they're both looking down, extraordinarily proud.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are all proud of you, Mandell. Now, you have a saying that we win in life with the help of others. What do you mean by that?
So I heard, there's a woman, legendary basketball coach, arguably the greatest basketball coach of all time. Some folks will push me on this. Legendary Pat Summitt. She passed away a few years ago. She was the head women's basketball coach at the University of Tennessee. I think she won 8 national titles. And at her last public event, she was at the ESPY Awards, and she was being honored for her great work. And she passed away. I think she had Alzheimer's. Oh, wow. And when she accepted the award, she said, "You win in life with people." And it really resonated with me, because the reality is, Sylvia, there's no such thing as a self-made success. Yeah. I know we say that sometimes, we could be a little casual with it. There's just no way possible that you could be successful on your own. And I know for a fact, and this isn't false modesty, there are a lot of folks. I've been spotlighting my grandparents, but there have been a lot of folks along the way who have poured into me, who have, whether it's advice or made a particular investment in me, that have played a small, medium, or large role in me ultimately getting to where I am. And so that's just something that I try to pay it forward, because I have that philosophy that we all are standing on the shoulders of other people.
Absolutely. 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 And we've spoken about your successes, Mandell. What would you say have been some of your scars along the way?
Well, there was a time when
You wouldn't be here without the scars.
I was 14 years old. I was with a bunch of my friends. We were at a mall in Chicago, and we decided to steal some fake jewelry in the store. That was something that I did that was incredibly stupid. That resulted in my grandmother and grandfather going upside my head. And let's just say I never did that again. So that's one. But in all seriousness, a couple things. One was back in 2009, Morgan Stanley acquired Smith Barney, and it was the largest transaction in the history of the industry. And with that transaction came obviously a lot of redundancies between the two firms, because the firms essentially were mirror images. This is on the other side, or I should say in the middle of the financial crisis. And at that time, I was a national sales manager, and the job I was being offered on the other side of this merger was a regional sales manager. So not one level lower than where I was, Sylvia, 2 levels. And I was really upset, and I was walking up and down the street like somebody stole my bike. I was pissed, to be blunt about it. And I thought about leaving the firm, and I actually started taking steps to leave the firm. I started interviewing with a competitor, all because my ego was bruised.
Right.
And that's just one example. I talked about impulse control. That was an example of not having impulse control, because essentially, because that competitor went into a hiring freeze, that job prospect fell through. And again, I attribute that to the grace of God stepping in, saving me from myself. And 2 years after the fact, I was back in the national sales manager job, but the job was now twice as big as it was before.
Wow.
And so that was just an example of being overly emotional, and again, lacking impulse. And there have just been a series of other, mistakes, but that's one that really, truly, comes to mind for me. Now, if my wife was on this call, she'd have a laundry list of other things.
We can get her in. We can get her in.
Let's just, I don't want to give Peter any material. Let's just pause it right there. That's one that definitely jumps out to me.
Great. Now, Mandell, you are a successful Black person, and sometimes people think that as a successful Black person, that you're immune from racism. What do you have to say to that?
Well, being successful comes with a certain set of privileges, right? In this country, and this obviously is not unique to the U.S., but just in general, it affords you the resources to go places that you probably wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to go. You get access to people that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So I am by no means blind to the benefits, right, of the quote unquote success. But the reality is, right, the caste system that has existed in this country for 400 years is economically agnostic, right? So a lot of times, because of your success affords you to go to places that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to go, in many instances, those places aren't used to seeing Black folks. And when you're in those places, right, it gives some folks pause. Or, if you see me on weekends, right, sometimes the suit and occasionally the tie, it fools people, right? That's not what I'm wearing when I'm home or on weekends, when I'm wearing sweatpants and my Jordans or whatever. And when I'm in my car and I get pulled over by the cops, my heart rate jumps like everybody else's, right? Because you just don't know what's going to happen. For something that should be so transactional and so perfunctory, it ends up being life and death. And we know the realities of that. And so I've never been confused, and it's never been lost on me around the challenges and the risk, again, resulting from this caste system that we have. And again, whether it's India, whether it's obviously the apartheid in South Africa, and clearly there are other countries in Africa that have had to deal with issues like this. Obviously, Germany leading up to World War II. I mean, there's so many stories of this. But here in the U.S., and this troubles people when we say this, we have a caste system, and all of us, right, of color, are at risk at times. And I'm definitely no different than that.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. And I think all of us have had our share of, like you say, whether it's the fear that grips you when the police stops you. And I know for me, it is when my boys go for a run,
Totally.
just, wondering if they are okay.
Totally.
Now, you were the first Black person in your family to go to college.
Yeah.
You spoke about being the only Black person at the trading desk for 7 years.
Mm.
You have still managed to be successful. Now, as Black people, we often talk about representation matters.
Yeah.
You had none of that.
Yeah.
And you have still managed to be successful. You had none of that at home. You had none of that at work. But you have still managed to be successful. Does representation really matter, or can we bulldoze our way through the Mandell way?
No, without question, representation matters. It matters a lot, and so I was actually able to what I would just say manufacture representation. And what I mean by that specifically is, so while in that immediate workspace, I didn't have folks who looked like me. Again, I mentioned the financial advisor who was a couple floors down. But, platforms like Black Enterprise was extraordinarily eye-opening for me, right? They'd have the top 100, top 50 executives, top 100 executives. So prior generation Black folks of significant success, whether it's the Ray McGuires, the Bill Lewises, the Chuck Phillips, the Ken Chenaults of the world, like seeing these folks, having such high level of, reaching the pinnacles of this industry was eye-opening. So even though I wasn't in the room with them, right, the fact that I knew they existed, played a big part of I just simply say what motivated me. But there were also folks, in my church, there's a guy who's a pastor of that same church today named Cy Fields, who didn't just have his undergrad, he had his master's degree. That was incredibly inspiring for me. My Sunday school teacher of a prior generation would talk to us every Sunday, all the boys, about everybody has 24 hours in a day, and it's what you do with your 24 hours that makes all the difference in the world. So these were folks who were, along the way, I was picking up, pearls of wisdom for them that played a big part. And then when I got to New York, I saw folks like Carla Harris inside of Morgan Stanley, right? James and George Van Amsten. So these are folks who looked like me, who were senior in the firm. And so, and for me, one of the things I've come to recognize, Sylvia, is just how powerful the multiplier effect is. And this is why I'm so extraordinarily bullish for our people going forward. And I think about your boys who are coming behind us because, my cousin, I have a first cousin who was essentially raised by my grandparents as well. He's 4 years younger. So I was the first to go to university, and I went to a local state university, state college.
Okay.
He comes 4 years behind me. He goes to Stanford.
Oh.
And then he goes to Stanford Medical School, and now he's an emergency medical, doctor. He's the chief medical officer for the NBA.
Wow.
Just 4 years younger. And so once the doors open, right, once we start to come in, once we find our voice, once that confidence is there, there's no limit to what we can do. And my own family is a microcosm of that example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Mandell, 28 years ago, when you signed up as an intern, as a high school student from Westside Chicago, did you have the faintest idea what you were getting into? Did you ever fathom that you would be a managing director, let alone the head of private wealth management today?
No. I mean, that's the honest answer. When I got this job, it was transactional, 20 hours a week, $5 an hour. I mean, that was the wage of the job. And I had every intent at the end of that year to go to college and then go on to be an educator. And frankly, I still have the education bug. I do a lot of guest lectures. I've done some at Columbia, Fordham. I do quite frequently. I went there for business school, and I own a college that's here in New Rochelle. So I still have the bug. And I oftentimes say that when the music stops at Morgan Stanley, I'll end up in somebody's classroom. But it wasn't something that I could fathom, all those years ago.
Wow. Wow. So talking about giving back, you've just touched on it. Is there anything else that you have done in terms of giving back?
Yeah, for us, in my household, our theme is young people. Young people education is an adjacent vertical for us, and then lastly is autism. One of my daughters is on the autism spectrum.
Mm,
Beautiful daughter, Jaden. And so those are the themes in terms of where we give not just our capital, our financial capital, but our human capital, our time,
okay.
what have you. And the vehicles for doing it is the Boys and Girls Club, which again was an institution that definitely changed my life.
Right.
I'm a national trustee for the Boys and Girls Club. I do some work with the Covenant House, which is obviously all about helping young people who've experienced a high degree of trauma, whether it's trafficking or just they're homeless. So that's another area that my wife and I, try to contribute to, and then obviously there's various organizations, looking to eradicate autism. So those are and it's like the old adage of to whom much is given, much is required, right?
Absolutely.
So we've been blessed with resources, with talents, and the question is, becomes, so what are you doing with your talents? What are you doing with what you have? And we all, irrespective of where we are on the wealth curve, have something to give.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is so important to give back and to, carry it forward. We have been fortunate to be where we are. And so it is absolutely our responsibility to make sure that, others can get to where they can be as
100%.
far as they can go.
100%.
Now, Mandell, you've had an illustrious career over 28 years. Like we have said, not without its bumps and its lessons. But is there anything that, looking back, that you do differently?
I appreciate the question, Sylvia. I don't have many regrets, right? Even the mistakes and the foot faults and the scar tissue, because in their own way, obviously with perfect information, I'm sure there are things I would do differently, but just based on the decisions that I made at that time, there's not a ton I would change. But I will say this. I mentioned my younger cousin a moment ago. I never got to experience, going away to college, a full immersion in a campus environment, building relationships that will go on to last a lifetime, rooting for your soccer team, your football team, your basketball team, having all the swag of your school. I will say that I didn't join a fraternity. So those are things that, I never experienced because I had to grow up so early. And so I didn't get a chance to participate in some of that. And I wish I had. I oftentimes say if I could do college all over again, I probably would have gone to Howard University or Morehouse or something like that. But that wasn't my reality, and I didn't have the ability to do that at that particular time. But as it relates to how things turned out, again, by the grace of God, I'm pretty pleased.
Absolutely. And Mandel, what have you got to say by way of encouragement to the youth? Maybe someone looking at you and wondering if there is any way that they can be you.
Yeah. Well, the short answer is unequivocally, not only could they do what I've done, they can go further. Right. And if I'm doing my job, right, and folks in my generation, if we're doing our jobs, right, we want to create the space for folks coming behind us to go further. That's how this thing is supposed to work, right? And I'd say a couple of things. In addition to the point that I made earlier, Sylvia, about self-confidence, like having mentors and sponsors is really important, but it's your own self-talk.
Right.
That's most important. Like, what are you feeding yourself about yourself?
Right.
Managing those insecurities. Again, acknowledging the fact that everybody has it. Everybody has their insecurities and the impulse control. But in addition to that, right, we're thinking about our career journey and its securities. And there's a certain level of resiliency that you have to have. I think a lot of times when we run into headwinds, we're quick to, and I almost did the same thing. We're quick to want to cut and run.
Right.
Stick through the process. And the last thing I'll say on this is something that I heard Jim Collins, from the he wrote the book Good to Great, and I think he had a follow-up book called Built to Last, and he was talking about basically career success. And he said there are 3 concentric circles that contribute to one's career success. First, doing what you love. And that's a big cliche, and we hear that all the time. But what is the thing that you are uniquely interested in, right? What's the thing that gets you up in the morning, right? Like, I know this platform is something that's a labor of love. You're passionate about it, and that's why you launched it, right? Absolutely. The second thing is, what are you uniquely gifted to do, right? What's your superpower? Or as I like to say it in our business, we talk about alpha, right? Incremental value add above and beyond what the market gives you. So what is the thing that you are almost genetically wired to do? Right. So this is that play in your lane. Like, what's your lane? Stay in your lane and dominate. And then the third thing is this question of, can I be useful? Right? Does the work matter? Right? Am I contributing to society? Am I contributing to the operating performance of the organization, or what have you? So what's the value add? So do what you love. Are you wired to do it? And can you be useful? And I think if you can answer those 3 things, that will give you a sense of, are you playing in the space that you should be playing from a career progression perspective? I found that to be extraordinarily helpful for me.
Right. That is amazing. Those are some amazing words. And sometimes you just need to step into the ring, even if it's with a gold suit, right?
It's something that Will Smith says. He talks about the difference between fear and danger. Danger is very real. Danger is something real. Fear is not. Fear is not. Right? Step into that thing. And that's where, again, confidence and the insecurities and all those things that we've talked about are just extraordinarily important. So, lean into it, as they say.
Absolutely. And I have also heard fear being presented as false evidence appearing real.
Absolutely.
And I love how you presented it. Danger is real. Fear isn't. Fear is most of the time things that we build up.
100%.
All on our own.
We spend time, working on our physical condition, our physical attributes. We go to the gym. And I do think society is waking up to the importance of mental health. I mean, I think you're seeing it across the corporate landscape, and there's more messaging about it. Right. But that is so, and frankly, that's one of those things I didn't always appreciate. I just always just sort of felt like, just suck it up and keep pushing forward. But taking time to invest in your mental health is extraordinarily important, and making sure you're feeding yourself this positive reinforcement, being realistic, but positive reinforcement about your capabilities. And it makes a world of a difference.
Absolutely. Now, talking about going against fear and your self-confidence, I have a surprise for you, Mandell.
Uh-oh.
I dug deep.
Oh my God. Here's the sad part of this, Sylvia, is that's not that different. So I had on a black shirt, and I had on this black and gold tie, and frankly, this suit actually made me a little better. And I'm just glad you didn't show the shoes, because I think I had my gold shoes on too. And you scared me a little bit, but I love this. I love it. People always ask me about it. They're like, "Do you still have the suit?" I'm like, "No, I don't have the suit, thank God." But this is so. If I ever have something made at the wax museum, this is probably what it will.
Yep, guys. So step into the ring, even if it's a gold suit that you have.
Absolutely, that is really good. Hopefully Peter didn't do that, because I'll owe him if he did.
No, he didn't. And I could not find a full photo of you with shoes, so we couldn't get the gold shoes.
Thank God. So I've done something right.
And Photoshop could only do so much. So
sure. That's well done. Well played.
Now, Mandell, as we conclude, I know you have given us so much, shared so much. Do you have any last message for our viewers?
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And as I said before we went live, I'm extraordinarily proud of you stepping into something that you've had a vision for and not waiting for perfect, right? Just jumping in the ring and knowing that, don't let, perfect be the enemy of better. And so that you'll iterate over time and putting together a platform we can share our stories, and we all have one. I could easily be interviewing you right now and pulling out gems from your story, your journey, and it's all inspiring stuff. And hopefully folks were able to draw a little bit from my personal narrative. I would just simply say that this country, right, has is at a real inflection point. And whether you're, a Black American born and raised here, or you migrated here, a lot of our challenges are the same. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I will tell you, Sylvia, that I've taken most from, my Black brothers and sisters who've immigrated here from Nigeria or Ghana, or pick your location, it has been this thing we've talked about as confidence. And I'm convinced, by not growing up in the caste system here, like in bringing your full self to this country, right? Mm-hmm. And not just your education, but all the things that make you uniquely you. It's incredible. I was reading something that, Nigerians are 1% of Black Americans in the country, but they're 40% of the Black students at Harvard. Oh, wow. What explains that, right? Mm-hmm. To me, it is that confidence, that belief in oneself, that frankly there are no limits to what you can do. And so to everybody that's checking this out, obviously we're coming up close to the holidays. God bless you. Thank you for giving me this moment. And for the young people, I'm rooting for you, and I look forward to you taking what I've done and taking it to a whole other level. So thank you very much, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mandell. This is episode 9 of 10. Next week, we finish the season before the holidays kick in. So we'll just give everyone a break. But I just want to say thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you're very busy, but you took time out to do this and to share some essential nuggets and your story, which the world needs to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you, friend. Be well. Take care.
We are not letting you go yet. Guys, don't forget, we have a live Q&A with Mandell straight after this on YouTube. He has 28 years of experience. So I hope you have your questions ready, and we will see you on YouTube in a moment. I am so looking forward to this. So see you in a moment on YouTube.